Ash Wednesday, 1942, Sister Maria Restituta, who had been trained as a surgical nurse, was coming out of the operating room at the hospital she worked at when she was arrested by the Gestapo, the secret police of Nazi Germany. But what was her crime? Well, Sister Maria Restituta was arrested for hanging crosses and refusing to remove them. Her punishment would be the removal of her head. But wait, how the heck did we even get here? Before we can talk about Sister Maria Restituta's death, we must start at the beginning. So let us travel back to the year 1894 to the city of Brno in what is now the Czech Republic. Sister Maria Restituta was born Helena Kafka on May 10, 1894, the sixth daughter of Anton Kafka, a shoemaker, and his wife Maria. Helena grew up with her family in Vienna, and as a young girl she worked first as a housemaid and then as a salesgirl in a tobacco shop. In 1913, Helena became a nurse at the municipal hospital in Vienna, and it was then that she came into contact with the Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity. Helena entered their congregation in 1914, at the age of 20, and was given the religious name of Maria Restituta, after the 4th century martyr Restituta. Sister Maria Restituta continued working at the hospital in Vienna until 1919, when she was transferred to a hospital in the suburban town of Modling, which is about 9 miles south of Vienna. She would continue to work at the hospital in Modling for the next 20 years, eventually becoming its leading surgical nurse. Sister Maria Restituta soon gained a reputation for not only being a devoted and capable nurse, but also a person who was particularly close to the poor, the persecuted, and the oppressed. She once even protected a Nazi doctor from arrest which she thought was unjustified. And speak of the devil, let's now get into the Nazis' connection to this story. March 13, 1938, the German Reich, or Nazi Germany, took over the country of Austria, where Sister Maria Restituta lived. When Hitler took over Austria, Sister Restituta made her total rejection of Nazism quite clear. She called Hitler a, quote, madman, and said of herself, quote, a Viennese cannot keep her mouth shut. Her reputation spread rapidly when a new hospital wing was constructed, and Sister Restituta kept a traditional Catholic practice and hung a crucifix in every room. The Nazis demanded that the crosses be removed, threatening Sister Restituta's dismissal from the hospital. The crucifixes were not removed, nor was Sister Restituta, since her community said they could not replace her. Some of you may be wondering, why did the Nazis want the crosses removed? Well, there's a simple answer to that, and it goes like this. Nazi principals could not accept an establishment, such as the Catholic Church, whose legitimacy did not spring from the Nazi government. The Nazis wanted the Church to bow down to them. To many Nazis, Catholics were suspected of insufficient patriotism, or even of disloyalty to the fatherland, and of serving the interests of, quote, sinister alien forces. Nazi radicals also hated the Semitic origins of Jesus and the Christian religion. To put it simply, the Nazis couldn't control the Catholic Church, and so instead they took out their anger and hatred on innocent Catholic civilians. Sister Restituta continued her vocal criticism of the Nazi government, and several years later, in 1942, she was betrayed by a doctor who strongly supported the Nazis. And now here we are again, Ash Wednesday, 1942. Sister Maria Restituta was arrested by the Nazis and accused not only of hanging the crucifixes in the hospital rooms, but also of having dictated a poem mocking Hitler. On October 28, 1942, Sister Restituta was sentenced to death for, quote, aiding and abetting the enemy in the betrayal of the fatherland and for plotting high treason. Just to give you a sense of how insane the Nazis were, quote, aiding and abetting the enemy? Who is the enemy in this situation? God? The Catholic Church? I am sure even those Nazi idiots who sentenced Sister Restituta to death had no idea who the enemy was. Nonetheless, the authorities offered to release Sister Restituta if she would leave the convent, but she refused. Sister Restituta would spend over 1 year on death row, and while she was in prison, she cared for the other prisoners, as even communist prisoners later attested. During this period, she wrote in a letter from the prison, quote, "It does not matter how far we are separated from everything, no matter what is taken from us. The faith that we carry in our hearts is something that no one can take from us. In this way, we build an altar in our own hearts." When a request for clemency reached the desk of Martin Borman, head of the Nazi Party Chancellery, he replied, quote, "I think the execution of the death penalty is necessary for effective intimidation." Martin wanted Sister Restituta to die as an example of what happens when you dare to resist Nazi Germany. After various requests for clemency were rejected by the authorities, on March 30th, 1943, Sister Maria Restituta was beheaded in the Vienna Regional Court. The day of her death just so happened to be Tuesday of Holy Week. She was 48 years old. On June 19, 1998, Pope John Paul II arrived in Austria for his third visit to the country. Many don't know this, but His Holiness grew up in Poland during World War II and saw the devastation that Nazi Germany brought not only to Poland, but to Europe in general. In January 1945, 25-year-old Karol Wojtyła, who would later be known around the world as Pope John Paul II, helped a 14-year-old Jewish refugee girl named Edith Zierer, who had escaped from a Nazi labor camp. Edith had collapsed on a railway platform, so Wojtyła carried her to a train and stayed with her throughout the journey to Krakow. She later credited Wojtyła with saving her life that day. On the last day of his trip to Austria, Sunday, June 21st, 1998, Pope John Paul II beatified Sister Maria Restituta, making her the first virgin martyr of Vienna. Beatification is the step right before sainthood. By beatifying someone, the Church proclaims that the person in question is A, definitely in heaven, and B, definitely able to plead to God on your behalf if you pray to him or her. A person who has been beatified possesses the title of blessed. During the homily, Pope John Paul II had this to say about Blessed Maria Restituta Kafka. Quote, "Sister Restituta Kafka was not yet an adult when she expressed her intention to enter the convent. Her parents were against it, but the young girl remained faithful to her goal of becoming a sister for the love of God and men. She wanted to serve the Lord, especially in the poor and the sick. She was accepted by the Franciscan Sisters of Charity to fulfill her vocation in everyday hospital life, which was often hard and monotonous. A true nurse, she soon became an institution in modeling. Her nursing ability, determination, and warmth caused many to call her Sister Resoluta instead of Sister Restituta. Because of her courage and fearlessness, she did not wish to be silent even in the face of the National Socialist regime. Challenging the political authorities' prohibitions, Sister Restituta had crucifixes hung in all the hospital rooms. On Ash Wednesday 1942, she was taken away by the Gestapo. In prison, her Lent began, which was to last more than a year and to end in execution. Her last words passed on to us were, quote, "I have lived for Christ, I want to die for Christ." She risked her life for her witness to the cross, and she kept the cross in her heart, bearing witness to it once again before being led to execution, when she asked the prison chaplain to, quote, "make the sign of the cross on my forehead." Sister Restituta Kafka gave courageous witness to her convictions. The church today does not need part-time Catholics, but full-blooded Christians. Thank you, Sister Restituta Kafka, for swimming against the tide of the times. Blessed Maria Restituta Kafka, the only religious sister to be formally condemned to death in the area of the Greater Germanic Reich, was commemorated in Rome on the evening of March 4th, 2016, at the Basilica of St. Bartholomew on the island. During the service, the Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity presented to the basilica a small cross which Kafka had worn on the belt of her religious habit. The relic was placed in the chapel there, which remembers the martyrs of nationalist socialism. Today we take a moment to remember Blessed Maria Restituta Kafka and the hundreds of other Catholics and Christians who were senselessly murdered by the Nazis during World War II.